Daf Yomi Tractate Bava Metzia, page 66b, top of the page. Etc. If you wish, say instead that the Mishnah is referring to a case where the borrower said to the lender, "If I do not repay you within 3 years, you will acquire the field from now," and they performed a formal act of acquisition. Since an act of acquisition was performed at the time, this is a proper sale and not an asmachta. Mar Yanuka and Mar Kashisha, the younger and elder sons of Rav Chizda, said to Rav Ashi, "This is what the sages of Narda say in the name of Rav Nachman. With regard to this asmachta described in the Mishnah, it affects acquisition at its proper time, but it does not affect acquisition not at its proper time." Rav Ashi understood them to be saying that the lender acquires the field only when the loan is due. And he said to them, "This statement seems to teach no novel ruling, as the same is true of every matter. It affects acquisition at its proper time, but it does not affect acquisition when it is not its proper time." Rav Ashi suggests, perhaps you meant to say this: if the borrower encountered the lender within its time, in other words, before the payment of the loan was due, and told him to acquire the field, the lender acquires the field, as it is assumed that the borrower was sincere. But if the borrower encountered the lender time after its time, in other words, when the payment of the loan was due, and told the lender to acquire the field, he does not acquire it. What is the reason for this? The borrower says this to the lender out of shame with regard to his failure to pay the debt, but he did not really intend for him to acquire the field. The Gemara comments, but this is not so. As the halacha is, the lender does not acquire the field, even if the borrower stated this within its time. And as for the fact that the borrower told him to acquire it, he told him this only because he thinks this will ensure that when the time for repayment arrives, he will not come and disturb me. In other words, he is trying to buy time until he can repay the loan. But he was not sincere in his statement that the lender may acquire the field. Rav Papa says, with regard to this asmachta, sometimes it affects acquisition and sometimes it does not affect acquisition. How so? If the lender encountered the borrower while the borrower was drinking beer, it affects acquisition, as the borrower agreed to transfer ownership of his fields when he did not appear to be in financial stress, such as when he was enjoying a drink. He assumedly did so with full acceptance of the consequences, and therefore the transaction is valid. But by contrast, if the lender encountered the borrower when he was searching for money with which to repay the loan, his agreement does not affect acquisition, as it is clear the borrower made the statement under duress. Whoa. It's a big Amud. Under duress. Maybe we'll do it in 2 parts here. Wow. Okay, we'll do these 2 and then we'll do part 2. Ravach of Difti said to Ravina, in the case where the lender encountered the borrower while he was drinking beer, perhaps he was drinking to neutralize his fear, and he really was under financial pressure, or perhaps someone else promised him money, and therefore he remains in a precarious position, even though he can repay the debt, which would again mean that his promise is merely an asmachta. Rather, Ravina said that there is a different distinction. If the borrower is particular about the money, in other words, if he is unwilling to sell his property at less than its market value, the lender has certainly acquired the field, as the borrower is clearly not in such a precarious financial position, and he is therefore assumed to have willingly stated his agreement to give the field to the lender. Ravacha of Difti said to Ravina, even in that case, perhaps the borrower thinks that he ought to present himself as particular about the price of his property in order that the price of his other lands not be lowered. If people know that he is in need of money, then they will pressure him to lower the price, and therefore he acts as though he is particular about the price, but in reality he did not wish to sell the property at all. Rather, Rav Papa said that there is a different distinction. If he is particular about the other land he owns and does not want to sell it even at its market value, he is clearly not suffering from financial problems, and in that case the creditor certainly acquires the freehold. Okay, we'll stop there and we'll continue with part 2.